Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. It's afternoon in New York. I don't know where you're all coming from, but here we are. I'm Jana Renstrom from the Quota Alliance. We are a New York City-based nonprofit for gender equality and women's empowerment. We were born in 2015. We're very happy to see you all here. Our focus, we're sort of an umbrella organization for other women focused nonprofits and women entrepreneurs. And we are both local and global. And we have partner organizations, and some of you all here are our partner organizations. So very nice to see you all. And I hope nobody minds, we're recording this. If you don't want to be seen, you can just turn your camera off. Feel free to put questions in the chat. We'd like to know where you're coming from. So just everybody could just put a little note there, like where you're zooming in from. That would be interesting to see for us. And depending on how many people we are here, we might do a breakout room or we might not, but we do want this to be interactive. So after the panelists have spoken, feel free to step in. You all may have stories to tell yourselves and experiences that you want to share with others, and we'd very much like to hear them. If you want to speak at the end, you can always, raise your hand. Okay. So let's get started. Our moderator today is for this topic, which is the economic impact of, what is our topic? Economic impact of educational programs for women. The reason we're focusing on this is because we're, of course, concerned about economic inequality, and that's the basis really for advancement for everyone. That plus health and wellness, which is our other area of focus. Without those two, it's really hard to make progress for women. That's the reason for this topic. And actually it was last year's topic sort of as well. Some of you were there, I think. Our moderator is Brianne. Brianne, do you say Kaiser or Kaiser? I always forget. I can't hear you, you're on mute. Kaiser, right? No.
Kaiser, sorry.
Yeah,
yes,
like
correct.
The German way, right? Like the German Kaiser. So Brianne is a board member of CODA and a lawyer and psychologist by training, and has done a lot of work with various UN agencies, particularly in the field of gender-based violence. So Brianne, I'll let you take it from here.
Great, thank you so much, Jana. I appreciate the warm introduction. And just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. As Jana mentioned, please pop in any questions or comments you have into the chat. The chat will be monitored. We are having 4 speakers. We are a little bit flexible with that right now. We have all of our speakers are joining in from literally all corners of the globe. So please bear with us as there might be some amendments to the agenda. But how we have it scheduled right now, we have each panelist, and we have 4 panelists will be presenting for approximately 15 minutes. And if you have questions that are very specific to their topic, we invite you for just a few moments. We'll open up the discussion so you can ask questions directly to the panelists for about 5 minutes. And then of course, at the end of the panelists discussing and giving us some wonderful information about the work that they are doing on behalf of women and girls around the world, we are going to have a discussion, and the discussion format might take breakout room format, depending on the number of participants we have left at that time. So thank you everyone for joining. I do apologize for the quality of my camera. I am unfortunately on a work trip, so I am joining you from a hotel room where the light and my setup is less than stellar. But that being said, we have 4 amazing panelists you'll get to hear from today, speaking about their mission and their organizations. They're coming with us with a multitude of experiences as activists, as change makers, as educators, as leaders in the world of education, women's empowerment, working on behalf of women and girls around the world, and they will speak specifically to their specific context. This year, we are discussing, as Jana said, we are highlighting the CSW review theme, which is women's economic empowerment in a changing world of work. And we have reinterpreted this to mean, how can education programs and non-formal and formal education and education adjacent programs really lead to economic empowerment for women and girls? And what is the impact that education can have on these, on women and girls? Jana already introduced the Code Alliance, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. We have 4 panelists. One will be just joining in just a few moments, but I'm still going to take an opportunity to introduce her. I do apologize that I might have some of the pronunciations incorrect, but of course the panelists will correct me. We have, as our first speaker today, it's GirlbyHood. GirlbyHood is an amazing organization based in New York City. They build leaders, change makers, and advocates, and they do this through celebrating and amplifying the voices of women and girls through socially conscious theater making, storytelling, and performance. They open up dialogue and discussions about a range of issues affecting women and girls in their communities, ranging from gun violence to sex trafficking. So our first panelist will be Chiwaniso Caetano. I will let her in just a few moments reintroduce herself, and please correct me on any mispronunciation. Our second panelist is Itali from Sustain Cameroon. He is joining us so kindly from Cameroon today. Itali is an advocate of a grassroots nonprofit. He's the founder and the CEO of this nonprofit, Sustain Cameroon, and their overarching goal is to contribute to eradicate harmful practices and cultures that perpetuate violence against women and children. We will give him the floor in just a few moments as well. He has a vast array of experience, and he will tell us about his background and the background of his organization. Our third panelist today is Code to Inspire. So Code to Inspire is an organization which uses technology, education, and outreach to provide Afghan women to use technology so they can leverage their fight for social, political, and economic equality. Code to Inspire builds skills and infrastructure for women and girls to compete in the global marketplace by empowering them financially and socially. So our speaker today is Feresta Ferogo. Please correct me in just a few moments. She will give us a background, a little bit more about herself, but also her organization. And lastly, we have our fourth panelist is Danielle de la Fuente from Amal Alliance. Amal Alliance is an education organization specifically looking at social emotional learning, early childhood development, psychosocial support, and peace education. So they use these 4 facets to empower women and girls to be change makers and give them the tools and resources so they can fulfill their potential. It's looking at the lens of social emotional learning to address trauma at its root cause. And she will speak to us about her experiences as an organization and give us background as well. So I've spoken long enough. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist. Please, all of us welcome the Executive Director from GirlbyHood, Chiwanoso. Thank you.
Thank you, Bria.
I'm sorry, I butchered your name.
No. You were actually pretty close. You pronounced my name Chiwaniso Caetano. I am originally from Zimbabwe, hence the name. I am speaking of all corners of the world. I am currently in Switzerland, but I live in New York City. I'm going to share my screen because I've got some interesting slides, although I'll be mostly talking. So these aren't really slides to be read, and I'm happy to share them afterwards. Let's see if I can do this. Share. All right, is it up? Okay, fantastic. All right, so let me just switch my little box to the other side. Okay, perfect. So GirlbyHood is fairly young as an organization. We're just 11 years old, but in that time, we've reached about 2,000 girls and young women through our program. I am the second executive director, taking over from a founding executive director. We run our programs in schools and community centers in New York City. We've got a growing global program in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is funded by the US Embassy and State Department. Our sort of future 5-year growth model has us expanding our footprint to franchise our model to 3 to 5 other countries in Africa and the Caribbean. Our girls are leaders, change makers, they're activists, they're advocates. Through theater, storytelling, and performance, we develop their talents as critical thinkers and energized citizens in our communities and in the world. Our goals are ready to raise awareness, amplify, and act about the issues that we care about and that affect women and girls the most. What we do know in the work that we do is that women of color are underrepresented as leaders in all sectors, whether that's arts or culture, industry, business, politics, you name it. And GirlbyHood is working with literally hundreds of young people every year to change that. Our goal is to build a pipeline of young leaders who are poised to persuade hearts and minds to shift systems and to do this through both art and action. Our radical approach uses creative and artistic techniques to identify and develop the unique voices of girls and young women of color and bring those voices to the forefront. So, we talk a lot about leadership. Our leadership style, or what we're pushing, isn't, really sending girls out into the world to be, head of the United Nations or president of their countries, even though that's an outcome that we would love. Our goal really is to put our girls and young women on a journey where they are leaders in their own lives. It is a journey to manifest their own power and power in the world by breaking barriers and uplifting others. And how we will know we're successful in what we do is that in all sectors, in all industry, and all levels, there will be girls and young women of color who are in a decision-making place. In order to meet this impact, we work with ages 11 to 24 in schools and community programs everywhere. We have a very unique proprietary pedagogy that we developed over the last 2 years. It's called Leadership as Ensemble. We developed it in collaboration with our young people and our team. And it's really based in the general principles of creative youth development, where youth contribute to their own development in a collaborative process. The other sort of cornerstone foundational principle is this idea of collective leadership. So when we talk about leadership as an ensemble, we've taken the idea of a collective theater troupe or company as a jump-off point and melded it into a basic principle of intersectional feminism. The idea is leading as a collective brings the biggest impact to a community. And what we're doing is we're really stepping away from this patriarchal idea of leadership expressed in an individualistic modality. Our model of collective leadership uplifts all, supports all, develops a leadership mindset in every girl so that they can lead in their own lives, and so that they plan their lives and their jobs and their careers and the way they move through a community, thinking about what it is to lead in unity and as a collective. Our goal is to bring a cohort of girls together that deeply understand global issues that affect girls and young women, and especially girls and young women not from the dominant group and girls and young women of color. And not to just advocate for change, but really put out calls to action for those in power. Our ultimate goal really is to try and shift power structures so that what we see in the world moving forward is that the people who are making policy and making decisions are those who are directly impacted by the policies and decisions that are being made. An ideal world for us as an organization would be really one where girls and young women and Black and Brown and Asian girls around the world are in positions where they can make influential decisions that change lives. And that's really GirlbyHood in a nutshell. I've got some slides up. They're a little bit dense for the amount of time we have, but let me see if I can go to perhaps one of the more interesting slides. So the slide I have up right now is the GirlbyHood program model, which is our ensemble-based leadership. And this little paragraph here really talks about the framework with which we've sort of built the organization and the framework we have moving forward. And I'm going to read a little bit of this because it's really important. GirlbyHood values leadership that is grounded in the power and the healing of the collective. Through building a culture and embodiment of the ensemble, participants see their leadership as interconnected with that of their peers, adult allies in their community. So this idea of the ensemble is both an entry point and a metaphor for the kind of leadership we want to see in the world. It is built on trust, relationships, accountability, and it has an orientation towards justice and social justice. These values are really rooted in disrupting dominant cultural habits of white supremacy, which value individualism, intellectualism, perfectionism, and power hoarding. And it's a move towards collective leadership that has a deep history and roots in intersectional feminism and in indigenous and collectivist communities. So that is really our worldview, the lens in which we see ourselves in the world, the way we're moving forward. We would not describe ourselves as a formal education, program. In terms of the data that we track for our funders and supporters, our metrics are really very different for a youth organization. We are not tracking if the girls are graduating, are going to college, for example, or are getting jobs after they leave college. Like, that really isn't the focus of our program. It just so happens that many of our girls and young women do end up going to university or college and end up going to fantastic schools, but that isn't the work we're doing with them. The work we're doing with them is really building strong young women who are in a position to, wherever they end up in life, have power to make good and strong decisions in their life to navigate the challenges of girlhood, and for us, navigate the challenges of girlhood of color. Let's see, what are the slides? So this slide I have up, there's a lot of text on here, and I can just talk you through sort of maybe a part of it. This really is our framework and the foundation of which our curriculum is built. Our curriculum is a year-long curriculum. It runs on the American academic school year. We start working with you in September and it goes through June. And we are here as storytellers, and we're here as artists, and we're here as creators. But really the work we're doing as you devise your art and create your art is we're building your leadership muscle. So where our girls begin is really understanding themselves as part of a collective or ensemble, and that's the belonging component. We work with them to develop real identity and self-awareness so that they can recognize how they can contribute uniquely to a group. We work on empathy skills, care for others, their identity and stories, really connecting to what it means to be part of a community and caring for that community and seeing your place in a community and identifying things in a community that you have the power to change. There's a huge focus on the aspect of we. We really see the idea of the collective and the ensemble and the we as powerful and necessary to create social change. And really working with the girls to understand that where all of this begins is right there where they are, with our young people in New York City. We work with youths that come from families that do not have a lot of scaffolding. Many of our girls have come from abusive homes. Some of them have been trafficked, some of them in foster care, or some of them are going through the court system, and really working with them to let them know that this is only a very small part of their story, and that they have a future, and they have a future where they will be heard and they can move in the world as someone who has power, and has power to be in a place where they can make decisions and affect policy for other people, and that they are worthy and that they are powerful. So I think I might be out of time, but that's the GirlbyHood story. If anyone wants to see our full deck and curriculum, I'm happy to send it to Brianne afterwards and she can email it to you. I'm also really happy to do a one-on-one with anyone in the coming weeks who wants to do a deeper dive into our multi-page pedagogy. There's quite a bit going on here. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much for letting us be a part of learning about GirlbyHood and the idea of the collective or the ensemble. And I think that's something that when we talk about leadership and peer support, that it's something that really is so important, especially for young women or adolescents, depending on your preference. And I think it's really empowering to hear how leadership skills can instill girls to become women and to become change makers within their community. I'm going to quickly open up the floor just for a few moments to see if any of our participants have any questions to ask directly. We have 5-7-ish minutes to have some Q&A directly specific to GirlbyHood.
I'm hearing in the chat directly from Darlene, who is with Seroptimist in International Western Canada, and they also have programs in Trinidad and Tobago. So Darlene, I just shot you my email address. We should connect. Our Trinidad and Tobago program is incredible.
I have a question, G. When you mentioned about that you don't track the metrics of whether they go to college or whatever, what metrics do you track? Or do you focus more on like anecdotes, like stories and things like that?
No, yeah, I mean, the anecdotes, we call it anecdata, and anecdata, sort of the qualitative pieces are huge for us, and we do track that. I come from a private sector data background. Actually, I worked for a data software company for many years, so I am naturally a data person. But I do not think that the data that youth programs and youth development programs or even girls empowerment programs are made to track by funders sometimes fits the model. The work we do isn't really to make sure you get to college. We would love it if you went to college. We think college improves lives, but we do track a lot of soft skill data, improvement in confidence. We're part of it's an American nationwide system called Algorithm, which a lot of the youth development programs use. And it's very much based in social emotional learning concepts. So we're tracking, confidence, ability to connect. And, there's a whole sort of involved system which we track over the course of the year. If a funder approaches me and says, how many of your girls graduated high school and how many of your girls went to college, we'd be able to tell them, you know what I mean? But our focus is really working on identity and personality development.
Great. Quick follow-up question. What is your upper and lower age limit for the programs? And
yeah,
do you have to modify the program, depending on the age of the participants?
We do. So we start working with girls. Yeah, I'm saying girls and young women. We are an inclusive program. We've got some individuals who identify as non-binary or gender expansive. They're included in our program as well. We start working with them when they're about 11, so in American middle school. And our upper age is around 24. We used to, a couple of years ago, before we sort of refreshed our curriculum, we had everyone in one sort of group and all our classes would be together. And we felt like there was some value in the older young people interacting with the younger young people. And that really hasn't worked. I mean, if you are 19 to 24, the things you are going through are very, very different from what an 11-year-old tween is going through. So now our curriculum is very specifically tailored to sort of the 11 to 14 age group, and then the 14 to 18 age group, and then we do 18 and above. So the content and subject matter of what we talk about is very different. And we've actually found that our classes and the connection that the girls are building is much better based on that. There's a couple of questions in the chat. Heather Oxman is asking, what's your selection process? So we do have a audition process. We run our programs in sort of 2 batches. We run the schools and communities programs where anyone can come. We connect to school principals or executive directors from community centers. And pretty much any young person that shows up for these programs is allowed to join the program. We have a very specialized pre-professional, we call it the company or residency, and this is our audition only girls. So these are the young people who are probably a little more serious about social justice, a little more serious about craft and acting and filmmaking and documentary making. And we do audition them to get into the program. We've got a staff committee that reviews a portfolio, and then you're allowed to join a company. And the reason we do this is that the sort of level of invitations that our young people get needs sort of, a higher capacity performer. GirlbyHood has been invited to the Obama White House. We've done events for the United Nations. We've done events all over New York City for the mayor. We've traveled to, I think at this point, over a dozen countries around the world doing UN events. We did the most recent international event we did was the Nordic Council of Ministers just a few months ago. So for the sort of national and global events we do have young people that are a little more polished with their craft. So we do have a selection process for them. Our alumni are pretty successful. I mean, we've got girls who are now A-list stars. We have one of our first members was nominated for a BAFTA award, which is a British Academy Award, which we think is fantastic. We've got many young girls who are in TV shows on Netflix, appearing on Broadway. So, we think our model works. We think that our young people have fun. We think we learn something, and we definitely see it as a partnership with them.
Maybe we could do one more question from the audience, from the participants, if there is one. Okay, so I think, we'll maybe hold your questions, or if you're thinking about them. The email was just popped in there, so please feel free to email directly, and of course, if you want the slide deck, obviously that can be shared bilaterally. I'm also very happy to do that otherwise, but if you think of anything, again, please pop it in the chat, or feel free to contact me directly, and we can save those questions at the end if you think of anything in the coming hour. So on that note, I am super thankful for you sharing your background of GirlbyHood and your philosophy, or not the organization's philosophy, working with women and girls, young leaders, looking at peer support, really empowering creative individuals. So thank you very much. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our second panelist. So our second panelist, as I previously said, is coming to us from Cameroon. So another person literally from another corner of the globe. We're going from Europe to Africa. We have with us Tali. Italia is joining us from Cameroon. He is working with Sustain Cameroon. On that note, I will go ahead and turn over the floor. You have approximately 15 minutes, so thank you once again.
Wow, thank you so much, Brain. I'm so pleased. It's a pleasure for me to be a part of this very august occasion to discuss on the issues that we can do, or the interventions that we are doing to advance the status of women and girls. Before I even want to delve into discussing what we are doing, I would like again to remind ourselves of the key issue we are talking about. We are trying to trace the importance that education has in the economic empowerment of women and girls. So I will not say I prepared anything. I just wanted to speak from a viewpoint of the experiences that I've had with the interventions that I've been able to do, both as a staff with other organizations and also as the CEO and founder of Sustain Cameroon. So in my presentation or my discussion, I will be trying to look at issues of like the role that education has on the life of the woman, or on the integration and well-being of women. Does education really have a value for the empowerment of women? Is there any relationship between education and economic empowerment of women? What is the relationship, or what is the correlation between education and economic empowerment? And how helpful or resourceful is education in the life of a woman? So I want to, first of all, try to look at it in that perspective, trying to remind us. I know we all understand what it means or what our topic is trying to lead us to discuss. And I want to still remind us that education in the life of an individual is very primordial, and it is something that paves or gives the ground for you to be able to expand on the opportunities that you may have around you, or be able to represent yourself appropriately in the context where you find yourself, and be able to interpret programs that are directed towards you. So in that note, I want to say that Sustain Cameroon has been working since 2011, trying to come up with alternative approaches to addressing the issues of violence against women and children. And we are focusing more on trying to see how we can bring about, we can put forth or put more pressure on the issues of practical needs. Because if we look at the context, you know, Chinwoso is speaking from a context where we have in the United States, there are so many opportunities. And in Africa here, for instance, in sub-Saharan Africa, there is a lot of challenge that we face in terms of access to social services. And if you look at the trenches where we are working, those social amenities or opportunities, access to opportunities is very limited to girls. And, you know, given the entrenched traditional practices and customs that are placing them at the lower strata of the community or the society, this coupled with the these are the things that are causing the high rate of violence, or the high rate of teenage dropouts among girls, and high rates of early and forced marriages or sexual exploitation. Child marriages. Let me come, please. I hope you are able to see me. I just hope so. But I want you, like I'm saying, Sustain Cameroon is focusing on trying to contribute in ending all forms of harmful practices. Yes, I'm saying that Sustain Cameroon is trying to end. I was just trying to read a comment that was coming in, so please pardon me. I'm just trying to say that Sustain Cameroon is trying to contribute in ending all forms of harmful practices and cultures that perpetrate violence against women and girls, women and children, and which are not limited to early and forced marriages, sexual exploitation, gender-based violence, human trafficking, and modern slavery. So our approach, we are using a two-pronged approach. While we are trying to address the effects, we are also trying to address the causes. So we are working at the root, trying to stop the continuous or the perennial flow or the perennial consequences that are keeping women on perennial exploitation or exposed to these vulnerabilities. And at the same time, we are trying to address the consequences. What do I mean by this? Those girls that were not fortunate or that were exposed, that were vulnerable and were able to get into marriage earlier, we try to see how we can place them on vocational training opportunities that can permit them to be able to earn a living, that can be able to permit them to support their living in the context of the society in which we find ourselves. And then at the same time, we are trying to also work with these households in these communities that these children or these girls are coming from, these households or these communities where there is lack of access to opportunities that can permit parents to send their children to school. I'm talking about issues like poverty and low income status that are constantly standing in the face of these very vulnerable families who think that because of insecurity, marrying off their children will be maybe a safe decision to do, or maybe sending them to work in cities will be maybe a safer decision for them, because they believe that these girls or these children or this will be able to generate enough income that can permit them to be able to support themselves and even their siblings and the families back at home. So these are some of the things that have almost become a status quo, and they have almost accepted them as a standard, which we are thinking, we are trying now to see how we can break this status quo, and by trying to see how we can support the families with income generating activities, support the families to have opportunities that can permit them to raise income that will permit them to send their children to school. So we are saying here, if I go back to our topic, we are looking at it. Education, you know, when they are not educated, it is difficult for them to interpret programs and activities that are destined for them. If you know, for instance, if we are talking about formal and informal education, and we are talking about elementary education or primary education that we said was given as a universal access to primary education was given, and you realize that at that level, it is not prepared. They are not prepared enough to be able to fit in the context or fit in the society, be able to represent themselves, be able to vie for or to raise issues of their rights and to interpret programs. So we are saying that we are trying to say that these programs, you know, these programs are programs which we have identified as ideal to addressing the immediate challenges. You know, a lot of them are exposed to this situation because their families do not have a sustainable source of livelihood or do not have a sustainable source of income. And the opportunities, the social opportunities that could be found in the context of those communities are not available. So we may have only educational infrastructures that are in these communities, and this educational infrastructure sometimes may not be equipped, may not be well equipped, or may not be even having the teachers to teach in those contexts, giving the inaccessibility that some of the communities face. You know, it is sometimes very difficult for some of these communities to have access. Assessing these communities sometimes is a daunting challenge, and sometimes these children are extracted from these communities or are being lured out of these communities because there is no other second option. There is no other option for them in the communities. And when they are through with the primary education, coupled with the fact that the girl education is not prioritized in some context, in our context, you know, coupled with these two factors, it is possible the girl is being sent out early in marriage, or they are being easily lured out of the communities to be exploited in the cities under commercial sexual activities, or they are working as domestic servitude in homes. And sometimes, you know, some of these girls will end up sometimes, if for a year, somebody will say, I'm giving you a sewing machine that will cost about $50,000. That's about $100 for a whole year that you spend with such a person. And we are saying that it is important that we get to understand that we have to put more pressure on the issues of education, and we are trying to see how we can be able to support their education to the level where they are able to be independent. They can interpret decisions, they can be able to stand to speak for themselves, they can be able to be represented, they can be able to get to vie for positions of leadership. So these are some of the things that we are doing, and I am hoping that we could be able to speak, we could be able to relate further from this gathering that we have, and we can be able to identify and address specific issues which we have. So this is in a summary form what we are doing to enhance the the status quo of women and girls in our context. Remember, I said we are using a two-pronged approach, addressing the causes and also the effects at the same time. So that is the way we are looking at it, and we are also by saying that it is important that we will not be able to. We are advocating that education will not be only given as free education at the level of the primary level, but we have to be thinking about getting them to tertiary level where they can be able to have specific skills that can permit them to operate and also to be able to have competitive jobs and opportunities. So summarily, that is what we are doing. And I know my time is up. I know if there was much time, we could talk further, but I'll be open to answer any questions that are related to the specificity of what we are doing, if that is okay with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that discussion. Please do let me know. My internet is coming and going, so I might need to pop off or I might be forced off. But it was really interesting to hear about the context, the Cameroonian context, the context in which you're working, and really looking at specific social norms, such as around child and early first marriage and some of the consequences, not only on the girls, adolescents, and young women themselves, but also on the community. And it was also great to hear about, talking about education more broadly. So we have discussions around life skills, but also discussions more around, what does educating the community around specific social norms and beliefs, and how does that really have a longer term impact. So thank you for that. I think we have just a few moments here to open it up to the rest of the participants if you have any very specific questions on this presentation. So we have a question. So I don't know if you can see the chat, but the first question we have is, how are you addressing the causes, identifying and finding resolution to these causes?
Well, we addressing the causes. We are looking at, first, I want us to understand that the causes, the major causes we have is low income status, and we also have entrenched traditional customs, which are really embedded in the social constructs of our society, and we are trying to see how we can be able to advocate for a revision of some of these very obnoxious practices which our customs have been carrying on from generations to generations. We are trying to work with the traditional authorities and leaders, community leaders, to see how we can be able to review situations. So we are trying to see how we can review these situations and create a platform where these girls can be able to interpret their rights and their laws and be able to have their full potential, have their full access to their rights and potentials. And then secondly, we are also trying to see that some of these girls are coming from homes which are very poor homes and which are very which have no access to opportunities or to livelihoods that can permit them to raise income to sponsor or support them in schools. So what we do is that we identify these households that these girls are coming from. Our projects and our activities are rooted in the heart of these very enclave and difficult communities, where we are trying to revive, we are trying to activate auto-sustainable solutions, where we can, like revolving schemes that we are initiating in the midst of community-based groups, which we are identifying and working in collaboration with them. We try to work with them to identify a specific income source or stream, which they can be generating income from it and also be supporting children from these backgrounds. And while also we also support we support the families also to have income generating activities that can permit them to be able to generate income that can sustainably support the education of the girls and also support their own selves in this context. So I hope I am giving you yes, identifying solutions and discussing. Yeah. So that is how we are doing it. And then at the same time, we are trying to also identify the fact that education, by doing this, we identify the fact that education is an important aspect that will permit the tenets of this girl child to be developed, to be able to make important choices that will enable her to make important choices and decisions that will help to immerse herself into the society, into the mainstream society, and also be able to be of productive importance to that community. So that is what we are doing. So I don't know if that question is properly answered. If not, you can still come up again with, yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, I think that question, it's a very detailed explanation. So thank you. And it was good to hear about different ways you're viewing education and what tools and resources you're using at the community-based level, given the resources that are available, but also, again, to change it through the lens of more looking at changing norms and not only from working with social norms, I guess, and looking at more gender equitable outcomes. We have time for one more question, if there is one.
Brianna, I had just put one higher up in the chat. Just wondering if vocational type education is more accepted for girls who are already married rather than sending them back to school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you give some examples of what kind of programs they would be able to?
Yeah, we have for the vocational training, we have a series of packages which we are unfolding. And at the same time, we are trying to allow the choices to be made by these victims or these girls who these child victims. So sometimes we have issues like tailoring, which is being which they chose. Sometimes they have hairdressing. Sometimes they have decor that they do. Sometimes they have these beats. They could also produce beats. Yeah, so there are a variety. We allow them to make a choice, which is very open to them, which they can easily learn. That is what I like that question, because that is where we want to talk about the impact of education. The ability for them to interpret these programs also depend on their level of education. So sometimes that is where we say that education has a very preponderant role that it plays in helping to create or to curb or to address the issues that they are faced with. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. And sorry, Yana, just to quickly kind of come in, just kind of from my background, it's sometimes girls who are forced into early marriage are faced with other vulnerabilities and other risks associated with the marriage, and at times they might not be able to participate due to their new family environment and kind of some societal issues that might come with that. So I think it all depends on specific contexts that married girls are faced with. But I think the overall it would be, if allowed and if chosen by the girl child, if she is able to resume formal education, I think that's always the preferred outcome. That's the preferred outcome, I think, from global standards.
You are correct.
But of course, complementary to that would be vocational skills training.
Yes.
Just two quick questions here. We have, where does your funding support come from, as one question?
Mm-hmm. Yes, for the funding support, we also we have membership contributions that we generate, and we also have grants proposals which we submit periodically to be able to solicit for more partnerships to be able to expand on the programs which we are actually running. And we had a support from Army Foundation in 2018 that enabled us to be able to begin to put this phase of activities on ground. And we are also soliciting from further funding from external donors that can be able to partner with us to to be able to entrench these programs that we are putting in the heart of our community. So that's basically where we are getting our funding, and that's how we raise the incomes. Sometimes we also try to go through global giving, but we have not been able to be successful in global giving because a crowdfunding source needs us to be able to build a huge following, which we have not been able to have. And so we tried a couple of times, we've not been able to successfully earn their partnership. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. And in the last 2 minutes, we have one last question from Cynthia, who wants to ask you specifically, which modules are you using to deliver education content in your community, given the fact that systems in place don't always support the masses' needs?
Yeah, we are conscious of the fact that the systems in place, I'm sure Cynthia should be from the sub-Saharan Africa, that's why she should be asking that question. You know, we are very aware of the fact that our system in place in most of our sub-Saharan African contexts are not supporting the masses' needs. That is why we are trying to be able to play the role. That's, you know, they say the civil society or organizations or community-based organizations are playing a complementary role to support the institutions, the state institutions, in providing the basic necessities of the people in those communities. So we are actually trying to initiate where there is the absence of engagement by the government, or where is the absence of the government. We try to see how we can initiate those programs that can immediately provide for these people, for this group of persons, to be able to maybe relocate to go for further studies or to go for education. So that is exactly what we are doing. And we are mindful of the fact, and we are very conscious of the fact that it is very sometimes to these communities, that is why these communities lack these social amenities. I'm just trying to go back to what she is saying. They lack the social amenities because the masses are not being supported by the institutions. So we will not wait. If we have the opportunities to provide, if we have the opportunities that we can be able to educate them in order to be able to get other alternative ways of growing or of getting the basic needs that they have, we will always have to introduce those opportunities to them. So that is what we are doing. We are playing a complementary role and trying to assist in making them have what they need to have. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you for your discussion and the opportunity to present on your organization on Sustain Cameroon, and to really look at you know, what are the needs and kind of what are the specific challenges and how Sustain Cameroon is addressing some of those issues. So thank you for that. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and turn to our next panelist. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, it says thank you, sorry, it says my connection is unstable. I am going to turn to our next speaker, who is from Code to Inspire. So first is coming to us from Code to Inspire, which, as I explained earlier, uses technology, education, and outreach to provide Afghan women with leverage in their fight for social, political, and economic equality. They build skills and infrastructure for women to compete in the global tech market, empowering them financially and socially. So on that note, and that very brief introduction, I would like to go over and hand over the floor. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for participating in this session. My name is Ferishteh Fourouk. I'm the founder and executive director of Code to Inspire. It's the first computer coding school for girls in Afghanistan. So certainly establishing Code to Inspire for me was very personal, just because of my journey being born as a refugee in Iran. My parents fled the war early 80s when the Soviet invaded Afghanistan. And I was born in a very small town between Iran and Afghanistan border. So certainly being born as a refugee, you may face discriminations and challenges in the host country. And for a lot of Afghan refugees like me, accessing education and being deprived to go to school was one of the main challenges that the refugees were facing. We had to, receive certain papers from the Iranian government in case to show to the school, and then in order to be allowed to continue our education. So from the very young age, I think for me, I understood that the value of equality in case of accessing certain or fundamental, human rights. And to me, education is a basic fundamental human rights, and no one should be discriminated because of their indifferences or background. And of course, being born as a refugee, the financial and economic challenges that the families are facing is also a big hurdle. I remember that my mom learned how to stitch and make dresses, and by selling them, she could bring income to the family and invest on the girls' education in the family. So from such a young age, I also learned how to be an entrepreneur and understand that, or things can start with empty hand. And, sometimes you have to kind of be more resourceful and adapt yourself with the situation that is around you. But with that being said, I was able to finish my high school in Iran, and then 2002, 1 year after the fall of Taliban, and when the US invaded Afghanistan, we went back to Afghanistan, to Herat. It's a city in west part of Afghanistan where my parents are from. Just like every other refugee, we thought that it's time for us to go back to our country, and there might be more resources for us. I was able to actually get into university, and I finished my bachelor degree in computer science from Herat University. And then I received a scholarship. I went to Germany and I got my master's in computer science from Technical University of Berlin, and went back to Afghanistan and taught as a computer science professor for about 3 years in the university. So certainly my background, being a woman in as a student in studying computer science, the challenges, the pushbacks, the gender inequality I faced in case of accessing equal resources, especially in technical fields, the verbal sexual harassments women are facing, not only in the educational sector, but also in the co-working spaces, the lack of job opportunities for them, especially in the tech sector. And being a professor and kind of seeing that the situation really hasn't changed much compared when I was a student in Afghanistan, I decided to think about what I can do to, change the narrative in the country, in the community regarding women participation in the tech industry, and especially in the coding sector, which was a male-dominated field of study, but still it is a male-dominated field of study. So it was late 2014 that I was kind of thinking about, what kind of place I can create that I can improve the status quo of women accessing those educational resources. And I thought about Code to Inspire. With some initial funding that we raised November 2015, we were able to open the first coding school for girls in Afghanistan in Herat. And really, there's a three important pillar of the work that we do. One, provide a single gender environment only for girls and women, so that the family feel comfortable sending their daughters to the school, but also the girls and the women feel comfortable in that space, not being harassed, boost their self-esteem, create kind of this sisterhood environment for them to support each other, but also have a peace of mind and be who they want to be and raise their voice. Second, we offer the school for free. We don't charge students because a lot of them come from a very challenging financial background, which they cannot afford extracurricular activities, and families tend to invest in boys' education rather than the girl, because they think the boy gonna be the future breadwinner, the girl gonna get married, and there's no incentive in investing in her education future. So we didn't want to make that as an issue. And then the third, which is the most important pillar of the work, is what kind of technical skills we can teach these young ladies, so it can be translated either into work opportunities in the community in Afghanistan, or they can be entrepreneur, create their own startups and raise funds and hire more women in the tech sector, or how we can outsource remote projects to them where they can work, from the safety of their house or our school and get paid. And with that being said, we only have one location as of now in Herat, which is in person as of 2015. And we've educated more than 350 students so far in our coding and graphic design classes. The age group is 18 to 25 years old. Of course, we do have some exceptions from younger age group, and the classes are all in person. We have timelines in different, times of the day. The girls come, we give them laptops, internet, they can hang out and stay in the school. And we have mentors that speak in the local language and they teach them. In coding classes, we teach web development, mainly WordPress, full stack web, mobile applications, game design, and recently we added crypto and blockchain to our curriculum. And also with the graphic design, it's more about animation and different kind of like digital arts. We've graduated more than 250 students as well, and with the data we had is that 60 to 70% of our graduates found job in the community with what they've learned from the school, and they got hired. We've actually outsourced more than 35 projects in coding and graphic design worth of $40,000. And these are the girls who are getting paid the least amount of $100 to the highest amount of $2,000. So the average income monthly salary in Afghanistan is $150. So some of our girls actually make double or triple than the men in the family. And then 10% of our graduates became entrepreneur, raised funds and created their own startups and providing IT solution services and hire more women. We've also, beside the education aspects and of course the economic aspects of our work, which is one of the very important pillar of the work, is how we can enable these young ladies to become financially independent and become, the breadwinner of the family, is to change the narrative in the community through storytelling, arts, games, and animations. And we've tried to identify problems in the community and make a solution for it. We create different educational apps, educational games, animations to raise awareness. For example, one of the recent games that we created was Afghan Hero Girl game, which the superhero of the girl actually is an Afghan girl wearing traditional outfit. She jumps over through different obstacles and, get scores and fight with the enemies to release the parents from the prison. So it's a kind of like a fun game, but really the message behind the game is that the girls can be superhero, and the girl can be a superhero even from Afghanistan because of the lack of representation in the gaming industry, and certainly from more of a Muslim community, but also still from Afghanistan. So once we launched the game, we were very surprised to see a lot of feedback from the community. We got hundreds of comments, thousands of downloads of the game, and a lot of people get back to us with their comments and, for improving the game. So we were very happy to see that it resonated with people, right? Because it came from the culture and it was something that people felt very close to it. And we saw young girls playing the game and they were excited to be the superhero of the game. So these are kind of like some social impact games and apps we do to kind of like give a story to the community, but also more of a kind of like women empowerment aspects from a young age for the girls too. But of course, unfortunately, as you're all aware of, since last August with what happened in Afghanistan with the political turmoil and the government kind of like changing and the new regime, many things have changed for the people of Afghanistan, but particularly for the girls and women of Afghanistan that were fighting, for the basic fundamental rights this past 2 decades with the international community. But then in the span of a couple of months, everything was taken from them, and there's no clarity of when and how things will get back to where it used to be. for us, especially as a school, that our primary goal and focus is education, empowering young women, financial stability. These are certainly some things that are against the core value of the Taliban and what their agenda is. And sadly, of course, it was a very big shock for everyone to see how within the span of a 2 week, the whole government has changed. The first 2 months, for all of us, we try to make sure that our families are safe. Whoever wants to get evacuated and get out, evacuate. Whoever is in Afghanistan, access medical supplies, food, and the resources they have to access. And until October, really, our mission became more humanitarian focus. We tried to see where are the girls, and what they need, how we can help them. And sadly, after a month or so, I received a lot of text messages from our students who were mainly breadwinner of their family, saying that they lost their job. And the reason is that because, of course, the Taliban policy, but also a lot of the companies told them not to come because they didn't want to jeopardize the well-being of the company with the Taliban issue. So they asked them not to come, the female employees. So, and these were the girls who, were a main breadwinner, who had, a way of income, but now they lost everything. And either they had sick parents, siblings, they were all struggling with some major issues in the family. And to me, it was so heartbreaking to see that literally half of the community are being, deprived of what they've just had a couple of weeks ago. So what we did, we started to raise some funds and put some emergency cash assistance to the students and their families and support them. And we partnered with Binance Charity and helped 100 families of our students to give $200 per month to pay for rent, food, medical expenses, and things like that. But then, of course, early October, we were once things got a little bit stable on the ground in Herat, we were okay, how we can maybe start continuing our work in the classes. So we decided to shift our entire operation online. We used Google Classroom. We uploaded all our videos and everything. We identified the students who don't have laptop. We gave them laptops. We purchased internet for all of them to access the online resources. And we, as of now, I can say that 80% of our students are back on the track with daily classes following the courses that they left early August. But of course, we want to keep the school open. Our location is there. We hope to reopen it. And recently, Taliban announced that if any NGO on the ground wants to continue their work, they have to renew their work permit. So we applied to renew our work permit. And we actually get the first permit, and we are hopeful that we can receive the second permit. And if we get that, we would be able to open the school sometimes mid-April. And with that being said, we do have about 300 pending applicants for our graphic design class and 200 for our coding. So if we would be able to open, we have about 500 applicants that we would take an entrance exam and welcome them to the school. But longer term, of course, what we witnessed, we are trying to create much more of a hybrid model to create that not only we have the location that we have in Herat, but we would be able to expand the school in entire Afghanistan. So as of now, we are working to create a platform that we can expand our curriculum to more resources and classes and localize them in Pashto and Dari, the local language, and create a much more secure encrypted platform so that the girls can log in and access the educational resources. And then at the end, once they finish, they get a certificate, and then they will be transformed into a pile of a pool of employment opportunity for them. So the next goal for us is to create that kind of a nationwide system for more educational resources, but also opportunity for work resources to kind of expand the work in Afghanistan. But as of now, we hope that we can reopen the school in person sometimes in April and continue our work. So that's kind of like what we are up to in the current situation in Afghanistan and what we try to push for. And happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inspiring us with your story, but also Code to Inspire, and just really taking on innovative approaches that really, when confronted with endemic power issues and really kind of repression, societal repression, of how you really shape-shifted and became a quite innovative program and went online. And really, thank you so much. That's an incredible story. That being said, I'm going to open up the floor. I don't know if you can see the chats from where you are, but our first question that we have from Heather is again about funding. If you could speak to that, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, so overall, I can say like we have, we try to diversify our funding as much as we can. So it's either individual donors who've been, our long-term donors, been helping us a lot. I can say like 20–30% of our funding come from them. We have corporate donors. We work with tech companies to do employee match program, part of their giving program, end of year giving program. We do online fundraiser at least once a year. At the end of the year, we come up with a goal, sometimes only 20–30 grant. We write also grant proposals. And then we also like participate in different kind of like fellowships and, things like that. So like, and of course, I can say last year, and of course, with what happened in Afghanistan, one of the major avenues of us raising funds with cryptocurrency. We can say like we are actually one of the very earliest organizations that received crypto as donations since 2015. So, but last year we did a lot of, we raised a lot of money to cryptocurrency donation and through selling NFT arts, which we are using it. So that's kind of like one avenue for us too.
Great, thank you. I think, Jana, your question might have been answered, but let's go ahead and ask more generally. But in terms of, you spoke about your expansion moving across Afghanistan, should the permits, the second permit come through. And Jana asked, is your expansion only going to be virtual?
It's both. It's going to be hybrid. In Herat, we'll keep our location because Herat has been always a safer city in any kind of like political turmoils. But in other cities, we will do virtual, but we may like have like a 1 or 2 room in a co-working space, put a bunch of laptops with internet, and the girls who don't have the resources can come and use it. But those who have it, they can log in from home. So it certainly will be virtual and in person.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from any of the participants specific to Code to Inspire? Okay, I think we'll go ahead and pause there. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your story. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and proceed with our next panelist. But of course, for any of our panelists, you please feel free to go ahead and pop additional questions in the chat at any time, and we will go ahead and be able to discuss them at the end of the presentation. Once again, say thank you and turn our attention now to Danielle de la Fuente. She is coming to us to speak about Amal Alliance. I know I had a brief introduction before, but just to remind everyone that Amal Alliance empowers displaced and disenfranchised children through 4 pillars, really looking at social emotional learning, early childhood development, psychosocial support, and peace education. They believe that all children have access to cultural identity, knowledge of their history, and should have the tools and resources that they need to fulfill their potential. So to speak more specifically about their programs, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Danielle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brianne. And let me just share my screen. Let's see here. Can you see my screen? It seems like it's loading. Maybe not. Hold on one second. We're having some technical difficulties. Is it still loading on your end?
It is still loading.
I'm wondering why that's happening, but if not, we can just present it in this
Now we see
way.
it. It's there.
Okay, let's do this then. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for all the organizers putting this together, and also to all the fellow panelists. It's been very inspiring to learn about your work, so thank you so much. As Brianne mentioned, we do focus on these 4 pillars of support, and we provide services to displaced and disenfranchised children. So pre-pandemic, we were working predominantly in Greece, Lebanon, and Turkey. But since the pandemic, we've actually been able to provide content to many other organizations, providing a much more global reach, which I will touch upon. So given so many protracted crises that are constantly popping up, natural disasters, it's not surprising that over 33 million children have been forcibly displaced by the end of 2020. And over 888 million children worldwide have had their education disrupted because of obviously the pandemic and other factors. And so children in vulnerable communities, especially in disenfranchised and displacement communities, are even more vulnerable to all sorts of security risks. So, you know, this lapse of being out of school, whether it be child marriage, human trafficking, exploitation, I mean, the risks go on and on and on. But also the adverse experiences that they experience during early childhood can have serious repercussions on their physical, cognitive, and emotional development, and negatively impacting not only their well-being, but also their future. And so it's really important to look at those psychosocial factors that need to be addressed so we can help the children heal, but also then re-engage in learning. So we see psychosocial support and social emotional learning as a bridge. So to bridge that learning gap that's been lost, but then also prepare children for their future. So since the pandemic, we've seen massive closures of school absolutely everywhere. But the risks were especially true for these communities, especially children with disabilities who are at higher risk of infection and just further consequences. And I think at this point, we really don't understand the consequences that may come from the pandemic. So we're really just trying to mitigate the risk as much as possible. So to this effect, we've seen that social and emotional learning is particularly important. So this brings in the idea of mental health, psychosocial support, and social emotional learning in and of itself is the process by which children and adults come to understand and manage their emotions, make responsible decisions, feel and show empathy for others, and establish and maintain healthy relationships. So if you learn these principles as a child, and you can understand not only what you're feeling, but how to regulate that emotion, you will by far have many, many benefits as you proceed into adulthood. Now, during the pandemic, we were very, very fortunate to win UNHCR's COVID-19 challenge. And what happened was that we took our traditional content that was being delivered in person and created a hybrid approach, which is now known as Colors of Kindness. Now, this is a EdTech, social and emotional learning solution, and it's all focused on well-being and ensuring that the child is ready to learn. So it helps the children transition back into the classroom. So if they've had this long lapse of disruption to their education, but also just helps a child process everything that we've been going through, deal with the anxiety and the depression and all of these feelings that have arisen. So really to focus on developing those skills needed to cope, but also just to understand the trauma that they've undergone and how we can best serve. Now, Colors of Kindness, this is actually Colors of Kindness in Action, was piloted in Bangladesh It was piloted both in the Rohingya camp as well as in the Bangladeshi community. And it was initially put together as a 10-week program, and the results were absolutely phenomenal. So we were not expecting such high results, but we saw about a 16.5% increase in the well-being of the kids in only 10 weeks time. We saw 99% of caregivers and teachers saying that they saw a pro-social behavior and positive outlook and a drastic change in mood in the children. So since then, we've actually been very fortunate that we received a funder that said, we really see Colors of Kindness not only being used in refugee camps, but also in schools as children start to come back to the classroom. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that we can create an evidence-based. And so currently we partnered with the Ministry of Education in Greece, as well as with the Harvard ESA lab to validate, to test, and to really understand how Colors of Kindness could be applied in school settings. So taking it not only from the non-formal settings, but also into the formal settings. So this is currently happening in Greece. Our pilot will conclude in June, but we've also piloted in Uganda in refugee camps. We've also created an offline workbook adaptation that was distributed through the Qatari organization Education Above All. And that workbook alone has reached 175 countries. So by leveraging technology and strategic partnerships, we've really been able to see that our specialty in creating this quality trauma-informed content that focuses on social emotional learning could really reach a much, much wider audience. And okay, so what I really want to kind of discuss here is how holistic education starts with social emotional learning, but creates this amazing wheel of opportunities. And so when you think about it, you're not only improving well-being, you're building and fostering relationships, you're creating higher academic performance, and all of this leads to better futures. And so when you're thinking of, long-term implications of social and emotional learning, well, there's different avenues to look at. So first, let's start looking at how that looks like in a learning environment. So recently, the largest social and emotional learning case study was conducted by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and it's based on this concept of the Big Five framework. So it takes social and emotional learning and it puts it into different categories, whether it be open-mindedness, task performance, emotional regulation, engaging with others, or collaboration. And it was very interesting because it showed that long-term positive outcomes of these social and emotional competencies really went straight to academic achievement, social cohesion, and job performance. And so if you take just, for instance, one of the skills that was highlighted in this study, it was curiosity. And so we have an entire color, or we use colors and clouds as a way to teach children. And so we have an entire colored cloud on curiosity, because it's so important to instill that awe and that wonder and have children be able to dream and imagine and see beyond, what their current circumstances may be. And so we do this through various different ways, whether it be art or movement. But one thing that we love to do is play Angry Monster Freeze Dance. And this is an opportunity for a child to really feel those, those big emotions. So sometimes when you're feeling frustrated or angry, but then also pause and reflect and calm down. And then it really explore that curiosity in this whole process. We also do other things like dream trees, where children plan out their individual and collective goals, but through this dream mapping exercises. So it really becomes a very fun way to introduce very, very complex concepts. Now, if we're looking at long-term implications of social emotional learning in well-being and social cohesion, well, it's really important to understand that some of these skills that children are being exposed to are empathy, respect, compassion, tolerance, relationship building, but also healing from crisis. So being able to relate that, so just because someone might be from a different religion, a different color, a different background, they're at the end of the day, we're all humans and we can all connect at one level. And this is so, so important when we're looking at so many situations where refugees are facing xenophobia and discrimination, and they're entering countries and they might not speak the language. And already it's a new situation, a new context. And then to face all of these is very difficult as an adult, much more as a child. And so if we can focus on their well-being and provide them with the proper coping mechanisms, this creates safe spaces where children can cultivate these protective mechanisms and learn to express themselves in a very healthy dynamic. Now, what are the long-term implications of the workforce? And so not only does social and emotional learning enhance those academic outputs, but it also increases the likelihood of continuing their education. And if they continue their education, they're going to have a higher likelihood of being able to get a job and then becoming contributing members of society, find their agency, their voice, and contribute in so many other ways. So really this becomes the root of potentially providing so many opportunities down the line. And so a broad review of studies of soft skills found that collective evidence for the influence of various social and emotional skills really does present themselves as workforce successes. And we've seen this, whether it be through communication or higher order thinking skills or self-order, but all of this contributes directly to how you become and how you perform in the workplace. And so at the end of the day, I just want to conclude by saying that we have an opportunity at this moment to reimagine how we're looking at learning. Social and emotional learning did not have such a dramatic space in formal and non-formal settings. But if the pandemic has done one thing that's good, it's called attention to the fact that we are social beings, that we need to rethink about our education systems and how we can potentially set up children to be their best self and to reach their full potential. And there's one thing I did forget to mention. So because, and the last panelist brought this up, most often boys get more opportunities towards education, not so much girls. And so the way we created our Colors of Kindness model is to be truly inclusive. So by putting these sort of these programs in a community setting where perhaps, you might have a household that has one device and the boy only has access to the device, well, then automatically you're creating an unequal distribution of access. But if you put this in a community center where both the girls and the boys can attend, now you're automatically creating an opportunity for girls to come and share in these experiences. So I think we just need to be really intentional and meaningful in how we design these type of programs, but also take advantage of the opportunity that social and emotional learning has now created a niche of such necessary work, and use this to create a platform for long-term possibilities to empower women. And thank you so much. I'll end there. And I'm totally open for any questions. So I'll stop sharing because I can't really see the chat window.
Thank you for that, Danielle. We do, we have a comment, not necessarily a question, but Italia is just commenting that social emotional learning is a program that can be fitted into other interventions targeted at empowering women and children. And I just want to echo that. So thank you for that comment. And on that note, as Danielle already said, please feel free to pop in any questions or comments that you have into the chat.
Yes, where can you learn of Colors of Kindness? We actually have a separate webpage for it. We have the main information on our website, so I'll pop that into the chat. But we have a separate webpage which has the actual content that we used in Bangladesh. We did create it as an open source educational resource because we wanted to make sure that there was something that was a quality content that was available to all. And so let me pop those into the chat.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to read a couple of the other comments. Again, looking at social emotional learning, we've had, 3 of our panelists are talking from a global perspective in their specific country context, not necessarily unique to the United States. So, I think it was just to echo that, that it is a model that is very much applicable, and tenants are deeply rooted in kind of the American, I don't want to say exclusive education, but, looking at the tenets of social emotional learning, not only within the US context, but how can that be applied and contextualized based on everyone's unique perspective and cultural perspectives.
Well, so in terms of contextualizing content, so I always say that, Colors of Kindness, for example, has a 75-25 ratio. So you have 75%, which is quite universal. They're the main concepts, that can easily be translated and replicated in other places. But then you really need to take that 25% and understand where you're working at. So you need to do a proper needs assessment. So who is your audience? What are the cultural norms? What's acceptable? Because there might be things that are completely inappropriate or that might cause more harm. And so that contextualization and localization process is absolutely key. It might be something as silly as Wonder Woman. So for instance, in Bangladesh, we love to use superheroes to teach breath work. Nobody knew who Wonder Woman was. So if we would have continued with how we developed it with Wonder Woman, the children wouldn't have known who on earth we were talking about. So, I mean, just making sure that, the superhero was relevant and someone that they could relate to, is one thing. In Greece, we're working with the Ministry of Education, and it's the Ministry of Education and Religious Affairs. And so we use yoga, and unfortunately, yoga has oftentimes a negative connotation. So it's figuring out how to package it in a way where it's, well, we're really just stretching. I mean, we're moving and we're stretching and calling it that versus putting a proper, yoga name, because then it wouldn't fit with what they're trying to do. So I can't argue enough for really doing the right homework and localizing it. And for that, you must talk with the local community. You need to talk with the parents. You need to talk with the teachers. I mean, they're the ones that are on the ground. Who are we to tell them what's best for their community?
Any last questions specifically for Danielle before we take maybe the last 5 moments and kind of open up the discussion generally? Okay, I don't see anything else coming in, but here we have more on kind of impact measurements. How do you measure your success and what are your indicators? We'll take that as our last question.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So, when we're thinking about well-being, there's not, an indicator that's super easy to catch on. So the way we've done it is we do a 360 sort of monitoring and evaluation approach. So we do pre and post surveys from the teacher perspective, pre and post from the parent, as well as the student. And then that's complemented by our emotions thermometer, which is a weekly emotional temperature check, where the kids, look at this emoji temperature and identify where they're at. And so from this, the pre and post assessments are specifically skills-based. So we're looking at the competencies of, where did they start? Where have they gone? Where did they end? And then we're looking at the thermometer for mood and positive outlook. So then if you take all of those different data points, you can start correlating, well, was this child more cooperative at home? Did you see an increase in happiness or a decrease in frustration or whatever it might be? And so that's sort of how you kind of arrive at those well-being measurements. But you really do need to look at it from all the different angles, because it's very, very different. And if you just look at it from like a teacher perspective or a child perspective, it ends up being quite biased.
Thank you. I am going to go ahead and open it to the discussion up. Maybe we have approximately 5-8 minutes or so to our panelists. If anyone in the participants have questions generally. If not, I have some just general questions applicable to all of our panelists, but I would like to go ahead and open it up first to any of our participants who are remaining. And I think at this time, feel free to come off mute if that's easier than typing things in the chat.
I don't really have a question. I've got a comment, and I just want to thank my co-panelists for sharing their experiences and their programs. Every time I do panels like this, talking from a US perspective, I just learn so much more from the experiences in other countries. So that's the only thing I'm sharing. Thank you very much to the co-panelists for sharing the work you're doing with your organizations and your location. As GirlbyHood grows, we're going to sort of take all the learning from this and move forward sort of in a way that reflects the communities we're working in.
Yeah, if I may say something, I just want to say that it is always very important to have such opportunities to come together, share our experiences, and it is also a possibility that we can be able to replicate best practices. I have learned about all that is being done by my colleagues or my co-panelists, and I believe that they are all interventions that can be interwoven into every intervention that we are giving in the communities that we are serving. Yeah, if I take from the last one that Daniel presented, you realize that emotional, it's more of something that works in the area of trauma healing somehow. And sometimes it also creates an enabling environment and a situation where people want to maybe induce best, which word can I use rightly there? It is a situation that can permit for people to come back to realizing their dreams, their big dreams, and setting a good platform for them to work. So I think, well, I normally usually say that when we come to discuss like this, it is an opportunity for a networking platform. It is an opportunity for us to even work together often, to be able to see what we can do if we are taking from here and putting here, or whatever opportunities we can share. So it's really a very wonderful opportunity, and I'm so thankful for Yana and Kota Alliance for coming up with such an opportunity to bring us together. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Do we have any reflections from the participants or more specific questions? I think for me, there was definitely, we've heard from our panelists have a varied experiences, contextual, cultural, and innovation, and also looking at education, either formal, non-formal, or education adjacent. But the theme that kept coming up over and over that I kept hearing was, the dynamics of power, of shifting. How can leadership, how can education, how can social emotional learning, how can that really start to influence and change some of those social norms with regards to power dynamics and the role of women and girls, and really achieving some of those gender equitable outcomes. And every organization has a very different perspective on that, but the outcome is very much the same. So I think, I really appreciated hearing all that. We do have a question coming in, and it's from Cynthia, who asks, how can we leverage the wide adaptability, how can we leverage the wide adaptability, I'm sorry, I'm in St. Martin and I've been working.
Yeah, how can we leverage?
How can we adapt and leverage the most? Thank you. I'm so sorry. I've been with the government, with the World Bank today, and I'm done.
Yeah, you need to.
I'm sorry, but everyone can read the questions. So if anyone from the panel wants to answer, please feel free.
I don't know. You are talking about, is it the mobile telephone you are talking about? You are talking about the wide adaptability of mobile and delivering learning content. Well. You know, we are living in a context where the bandwidth that is even supplied to us in our context is not the best, and access to the mobile is not so much penetrated into the trenches of Africa, and you know, it is limited to a certain class and a certain level of people. And if we want to apply the use of mobile in interventions, even though there are some interventions that are talking about the use of mobile technology in order to to promote the economic empowerment of women, there are some of those programs. But you know, where are this? In our trenches where we are working in Africa, you realize that some of these people will not be able to operate those mobile telephones. So I don't know, you know, unless we are going to be talking about how we can lobby for more bandwidth or lobby for the governments to be able to enable the bandwidth to be increased, and also to increase the trainings that we are giving, because there's a possibility that we could also create opportunities where the ICTs, you know, there are programs of ICT where we are empowering women in ICT, and also yeah, so like you are saying, yeah, so it is something that is possible given the goodwill of the provider, the service providers, and the state. If the state is possible, if the state gives a flexible platform, it is possible that the mobile technology will want to expand and to get into those very enclave communities, so that people can have access to communication. And you know, it is something that also gives them a good return. So it is wonderful. And even if I take what transforming into or the content being translated into all local languages, yeah, it is possible. It is possible that can be done. But if we look at it, at the learning platform or the learning scope or the exposure of that we have, there is quite much that you need to know about our context. And I believe I was even studying, just permit me say, I was even studying something on social protection in development, and I realized that Africa is very far behind, with about 18 point something, around 18.5% coverage. So you can imagine, as compared and as opposed to about 50 for the United States and maybe 70 for Asia and something like that. I was just trying to get the information. So you can imagine how complicated it is for us to be able to have access to those opportunities. So that is that's my own school of thought.
Thank you for that. I think maybe we can open it up and see if anyone else has anything to add more specifically. I think we'll pause there. I think we're getting to the end of the day, and it seems as though we've had a couple participants drop off, and others I think are quiet because we've received so much information. So we thank all of our panelists for everything you have given to us, your time, your energy, and really just your knowledge, which is invaluable. Really appreciate that. I think some of the common things, as I was mentioning before, you know, looking at power dynamics in the role of education and how really education does lead to economic impact for women and girls, regardless of how we term education, because it is a broad topic and it means a lot of things to a lot of people. And there's so many, it's not just formal, it's so many innovative ways we can use education to really impact how the economy is for women and girls. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Yana to say a quick closing. And again, thank you to all of our panelists.
Thank you very much, Brian. It was wonderful hearing from you.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Great moderation there, and thank you to all our panelists. Really fascinating to listen to you all. And again, I think we learned a lot of new things. Also, Atali, thank you for your comment about appreciating the possibility to get together like this. And if anybody from NGOCSW is listening, I would like to thank them for organizing. They've been doing that for 50 years now, enabling people to come together. And of course, where CODA is also all about collaboration. And I always enjoy these events so much, and we should really try to have something similar more often. I think with we have such a varied and diverse group of organizations now under our umbrella. So Brianne, we have to think about that going forward.
Yeah.
Do that. So thank you to you all for all the valuable work that you do, and for coming here today. And thanks to our participants. If you're not on our email list yet, please go to codaalliance.org and sign up. Or maybe you'll end up there, because I think we have your email addresses now. Yes, happy first day of spring to everybody, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
It
you.
was a pleasure.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mm.